Welcome back to the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren joined by Michael Stamps here to talk about Mizzou football. Today we're predicting 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses for Mizzou in 2025. As we've talked about all season, this is a difficult team to make predictions for just with how many new pieces and turnover they have. So I think this is going to be an exciting exercise. Mostly, I'm just excited to actually be talking about football because for the past month, it feels like there's been the house settlement. There's obviously been recruiting, which is exciting in itself, but to actually take a look ahead to what this team is going to look like on the field is rejuvenating. And we are in the month of July now. Fall camp will start this month, and obviously under 2 months away from the start of the season. So I am feeling alive. Michael, are you feeling the same energy with me with the start of the month?
Yes and no. Yes, because we're talking about football, but I feel like talking about the house settlement is in itself kind of easy, and talking about recruiting, especially for me, is so easy. And then we have to go make predictions for this team, which is just the complete opposite. So I don't know how this is gonna go. Hopefully, I have some coherent thoughts to put together because I think this is a challenge. It took me a
Yeah.
good 30, 45 minutes even to come up with a list and even have some sort of rationale and explanation for why I'm about to say what I'm going to say. So this was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. But like you said, making predictions for this team leading up to the season has been nothing short of challenging. So this will certainly be fascinating. But I do agree that it is fun to finally be talking about some football and not dancing around the subject.
Yeah, it was difficult for me as well because I think, especially with the weaknesses, it was difficult to pin down. I definitely think, obviously, this is not going to be a perfect team and that there is going to be weaknesses that show up. But I think for a strengths, at least, it's easier to point to a position group and say, okay, they're going to be able to do this very well compared to weaknesses where it's a little bit more difficult to pin down. Because a lot of these guys we haven't seen ever play in a Missouri uniform. They haven't played at the level of the competition of SEC. So it's a little more difficult to see what their weak points are going to be. So interested to see what you have to say on this. But let's start off with my first strength here. This was a specific one that came to me last night, and I felt very strong about this one. That one of the strengths of Missouri this upcoming season, compared to last year, especially an improvement, will be efficiency in RPO and play action offense. I think looking at the skill sets that both Sam Horn and Bo Prabula present, and I talked a little bit about this in the video that I have posted on the site Wednesday, of Sam is just so impressive off platform. You can tell he has a baseball background. He has a lot of just shortstop throws where he can just sling it no matter what platform he's on. Is just with a flick of the wrist, it almost looks effortless. So I think that especially for play action bootlegs where he can rule out would be good. And then the same going for Bo, just because of the threat he poses as a runner. Interesting looking at his high school tape. He's not like he's not like Sam where he's always moving outside of the pocket to throw off platform, even though Bo is mobile and really fast. He's more of he stays a little more content in the pocket, but he's not taking a bunch of sacks. He knows how to evade pressure. And so I think Bo specifically on RPOs where teams have to respect that threat of him running. So read option. Specifically, he's going to be effective at that. And I also think to have Kevin Coleman is going to be good for both those options over the middle of the field. Jamal Roberts on RPOs as a receiving option. And then, like I said, this was not the play action game specifically was not a strength for Missouri's offense last year. It definitely was in 2023. In 2023, PFF gave them a 65.1 grade. I had this flipped. And 63.4% completion. In 2024, 65.1 grade on play action, 63.4 completion. Compare that to 2023, 80.8 grade, 64.9 completion percentage on play action plays. I think a lot of that was Brady Cook's mobility being limited. But other than that, kind of difficult to tell what exactly the reason was for that. I would say the offensive line took a little bit of a step back too. But I think with Bo, and Sam, whoever ends up winning that starting quarterback job, they'll be in good hands for both of those options. Do you have any thoughts there, Michael?
No, it certainly is a new aspect of the offense, and it's not like, Bo Prabula or Sam Horn is like significantly more or less athletic than Brady Cook. Brady Cook, we all know, is more than capable of extending plays, and honestly is a pretty good athlete and is quite fast. I think we all saw that plenty. But there wasn't much designed run for him, and it's something that Bo Prabula specifically is experienced in. So I think there's no doubt that it's going to be a more involved part of this offense this year. I don't know how it's going to go, given some of the stuff with the offensive line. But I think that's going to be a fun thing to watch. So I completely agree, and it's an aspect I think I'm definitely excited to watch for sure.
All right, let's hear your first strength for this team.
Yeah, I'll stay on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm gonna just kind of a position group, kind of not go with the run game, but more specifically the outside zone. I think we don't need to beat it over anyone's heads that this is kind of what Missouri does, and they do it well. And there's been so many productive running backs over the last couple of years who have succeeded in the outside zone. And I think the additions of Ahmad Hardy and Keegan Truss as well at right tackle are really gonna hammer that through. And not I mean, I don't want to say there's not going to be any drop off because we can't, I'm not predicting stats or anything like that. And also, you're losing Armand Membu, who is a pretty incredible talent at that position. But Keegan Trust is not half bad. Ahmad Hardy is obviously quite productive. He did some of that at Louisiana Monroe as well, so it's something he's used to. It's also, I mean, it's not a rocket science scheme to jump right into. I mean, it's running backs heaven to be an outside zone scheme to just kind of go and run free and find those holes. And Ahmad Hardy is so good at so many different things. He's so fast that he can bounce off tackles and he can break tackles. I think it's going to be perfect for him. I think Keegan Truss is going to be the perfect complement to that. Now, how the rest of the offensive line is going to fare, we don't know, and I'm actually going to talk about that later for a little spoiler. So how the rest of the offensive line is going to fare, I don't know, but I think the outside zone is going to flourish. And I mean, to an extent, the run game in general, because Ahmad Hardy is an incredible talent. And not to throw anyone under the bus, but I would like to think that's an upgrade from what Missouri had last year with Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel. Different players, obviously, but Ahmad Hardy is pretty incredible, and a lot of people seem to think the same way. So I think that should be an upgrade just in general. Now the offensive line has to cooperate, obviously, but from a talent perspective, I think the running game is going to take or see a nice boost.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Obviously, we don't need to spend too much time talking about how great Hardy is, but I think he is going to be a really good fit for that. Is one of your weaknesses the same as my first weaknesses of the offensive line in general?
Yeah, that's actually like nearly word for word exactly what I had. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, because I have this is kind of layered, but I have in general the offensive line, but also the depth to it. I mean, with offensive line, obviously you're replacing three new starters, and pretty much you can go down the line here, and there's a number of things that the Missouri coaching staff knows better than us at this point, and they might have reason to be confident just from what they've seen. But one, I'm probably number one on my list is can Javid Richardson start at left tackle in the SEC? Um, Obviously, was a highly rated JUCO transfer a year ago, and competed for that starting left tackle job with Marcus Bryant through fall camp. But playing left tackle is obviously the most important position along the offensive line, and maybe it says something that Missouri didn't add some highly touted offensive tackle in the transfer portal besides Trost at right, as far as their confidence they have in Javen. But that's probably top of the list for me. Also in there is Connor Tolleson. Is he going to be able to recover not only on time but fully from that knee injury he suffered in November of last year? And then depth wise as well, I mean, losing Drake Heismer, losing Mitchell Walters is important. And so I think like their main line of backups is probably Logan Reichert, Tristan Wilson, and Curtis Piegler. And those guys, obviously Logan Reichert, highly rated prospect, are I would throw Ryan Justice in there as well, but just don't have experience. So it might be a shaky group to start the year, especially, I mean, anytime you have three new guys inserting themselves into there. There's going to be some cohesion and connection that needs to build. So that's my thoughts on it. What do you have to say about the offensive line, Michael?
Yeah, I have two different layers to this equation. But my main one is just consistency, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint a player for this. But when you look at the last two seasons with an incredible group of offensive linemen, they had the ability to string together good games and not allow a lot of pressure, allow the run to go well, right? And I think the ability to string together games, consistent games, they don't have to be like incredible, but the ability to not let mistakes compound game after game after game after game has been a huge part and probably a really like sneakily underrated part of Missouri's success on offense over the last few seasons. And I think that's going to be an expectation this season. So if that's not the case, that's going to allow for many or potential mistakes. And then the other layer to this is Caden Green, and it's more of a positive, I guess, because he's getting so much preseason excitement and hype. Um, you know, can he live up to it? He still has to take a jump. He was good last season. Everyone thinks he's going to be great this year, and it's the case with any projected breakout player you see on any team in any sport across the country, right? That he still has to make that jump and improve. So I don't really have any doubts that Caden Green will improve. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the best player on the entire team next season. But when it comes to the consistency as a whole, and that comes along with growing together and the cohesion, which I'm sure we're going to hear from the coaching staff. Um, when we get to that point as the season comes closer about how that's coming along. But all of those things go together. So I'm going to be looking for consistency, and I think that really could be a weakness if that's not the case, especially if they're rotating guys in and out game to game.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Interested to see kind of on your last point there if they go into the season solidified with their starting five or if they still are trying things out into week one, maybe week two. All right, that's offensive line, a group where there's certainly questions about. On to my second strength, a group that I'm really excited about. I feel like I've talked about my excitement for this group quite a bit, but just the tight ends Missouri has. And in both the run and receiving game, I think both these guys are going to be crucial, or this whole position group is going to be crucial. I think they have two guys that can be really good receivers and blockers, and Brett Norfleet and Gavin Hoffman. I think they have a guy that's an excellent blocker in Jordan Harris, and I think they have two guys that are great receiving options in Jude James, and then Vince Brown probably fits more into that mostly blocking category. And I was surprised last year to see, I mean, specifically with Brett Norfleet, but he was dealing with injuries, of how little the tight ends were involved in this offense. And I think it's going to be more of a focus this year. In fact, Eli Drinkwitz told Natalie Jones on his interview with ABC 17 this past weekend that one of the focuses was to get the tight ends more involved in this offense, and they recognize the need to do that. So adding Hoffman in there, having another year of development for both Norfleet and Jordan Harris. Jude James was the guy, again, that we've talked about, of having a really impressive spring that the coaching staff really took notice of, and he'll probably get some opportunities in this upcoming season. Again, they just offer a lot of versatility with their skill set there that I'm looking forward to see how that plays out. So that's my thoughts on it. Any thoughts on the tight end group, and then what's your second strength, Michael?
Yeah, nothing crazy to add outside of the fact that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you're a tight end super fan here, that Vince Brown and Tucker Miller are the only seniors in that group. I believe that's correct. So you have
Yeah.
Norfleet and Harris are juniors, and then Hoffman is a redshirt freshman, I believe. Drew
Yes.
James is a redshirt freshman, and then Dakota
Yep.
Trell. I would imagine he's going to end up redshirting, but he'll still be a freshman. So not and it's not like it's an inexperienced group, but they're so young and have ceilings and have a lot of development to go. So I think that's why they're so exciting. But I agree with the versatility there. I'm going to switch to the defensive side of the ball and talk about the position that I think I've probably raved the most about. Since the transfer portal and this roster has kind of been constructed, is the defensive end group and the ability to rush the quarterback specifically. Wasn't an issue last year, and I think it's only getting better, even with some of the guys that go pro, you lose a guy like Johnny Walker. Um, you lose Jalen Brown and Williams Nwaneri in the transfer portal, but it just seems so reloaded. And if you want to talk about versatility, I feel like this group has it. Zion Young, I think, is going to be one of those breakout guys that could not only become one of the better players or one of players better players at the position in the conference, but also make an NFL name for himself. You have Damon Wilson and Nate Johnson coming in, as well as Langdon Kitchen. I think probably all of the Missouri fan base is excited to watch what Damon Wilson can do. And Nate Johnson probably isn't getting enough recognition. I feel like those are similar players, maybe a little bit on the smaller side, but just ridiculous athletes. Then we have Darius Smith, who is another insane athlete, maybe the most insane of all of them. Assuming he's going to get playing time, I don't know maybe where he fits in, but he's such an insane athlete that I think there's got to be a role for him. And then there's Javion Hilson as well, the true freshman who kind of sneaks into that recruiting class that is probably going to be good enough to deserve playing time. And then, Tristan Newson can get after the quarterback, and the interior exists as well. Khalil Jacobs is kind of an interesting hybrid, linebacker that they like to throw at the quarterback as well. So, I mean, there's so much talent, and there is a sense of these guys have to work together to get to the quarterback, but at the same time, I feel like coming off the edge as a defensive end is kind of like an individualized thing where you really just get to see how good these players truly are. And I feel like we're going to get to see that this year, especially with Zion Young at the helm. And it's hard to, if you want to talk about, things that are hard to predict, I think it's easy to say that this group is going to do good. I don't think it's as easy to say who's going to play when. I don't know. I don't know what that rotation is going to look like at all. You'd imagine that Zion and Damon probably get the first, look at coming off the outside, but there's so much that could happen there, and plenty of variety and skill set as well, similar to the tight end room. So I think this is a position you're going to be able to count on when the season comes along, and I'm really just excited to see what these guys can do.
Right, like you mentioned at the end there, like this, at least last year, and I'd expect it to be the same for the upcoming season as well, as that those edges were rotated quite frequently, and I mean, all besides Williams Nwaneri pretty much were involved in this rotation. And I think looking at the diversity of the skill sets, like you hit on as well in this edge room, like they're going to have reason to rotate them pretty consistently. I would say losing Eddie Kelly in that, I mean, he's certainly not the best three edge rushers on that room, and Ja'Kai Lane and Williams Nwaneri and Jalen Brown are all bigger losses. But I do feel like what Eddie Kelly offered, especially in the run game, is a loss of kind of a more diverse skill set, but still, especially getting Darius Smith back, I think makes us a pretty flexible group. So yeah, I agree with you. Excited to see what that Ruben's able to do this year. Onto my second weakness here. I said kind of what you were hitting on with the offensive line, but just overall for the team, consistency. Because looking down the schedule, I know, like, we've talked about it before, how when the list of opponents first came out, ahead of the 2024 season, like a lot of people thought it was an easy schedule, and then you have South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt all becoming much better than people probably anticipated ahead of the 2024 season, and being in a much better place entering this year. And it's just going down the line. They have a few pockets that are going to be tough. I think specifically the hardest stretch of the season is going from hosting Alabama, playing at Auburn, and then playing at Vanderbilt. I think obviously Alabama is probably their toughest matchup of the season, just pure opponent wise. And then I would not be surprised at all to see them split the Auburn and Vanderbilt games. And so I think for all the reason you mentioned along the offensive line as well, of just having new faces in there, trying to establish that chemistry as the season goes along, it's going to be tough. And I think, unfortunately, in college football, like, putting together a consistent resume matters more, even more so than the end picture. Even of you have to win the game of opinions week in and week out, and kind of the trajectory you set yourself on does matter, and the perception you get early on in the season, it's a lot easier. I would say it's a lot easier to wear off a bad game from opinions and polls, including from the College Football Playoff Committee. It's a lot easier to wear that off when you have a whole half of the season behind you where you've proven yourself than it would be if they, get decimated by South Carolina and then Alabama 2 weeks later. That's a tough hill to climb back up from. That's probably the most. Really, just the most interesting thing about this team is how quickly they're going to be able to blend together, um, get the playbook under wraps, and have the coaching staff learn how to best use those players, because there's not much patience for that. Michael, any thoughts there? And then we already got through one of your weaknesses, and then your second weakness.
Yeah, like usual, I agree. We don't disagree much, do we, Joey? No, I think part of what I said with the offensive line, like you said, really applies to this. Can they string together consistent games, right? Can you, you know, have like you don't want to have your best game of the season against Auburn where complete on both sides of the ball, and then all of a sudden you're down to the wire with Vanderbilt, right? You want to make sure those are consistent games, and not that they're going to like. I'm not saying they should go into Alabama expecting to lose. They shouldn't have that mindset. The outside might have that idea and that mindset, which is fine and probably reasonable. But even if you lose that game, you want to be able to string together consistent performances. And consistency is going to be able to win games like Texas A&M, tougher ones like Oklahoma, maybe. You just want to be able to find some consistency there. So I agree. Especially with all the new faces, like we don't have to repeat ourselves there. I mean, this is a very different situation that Missouri is in compared to, I mean, at the very minimum, the last 2 years that we've been here, but over the recent years in general, when a lot of the key positions have had these cornerstones of the program. Like obviously, you look at Brady Cook and Luther Burden, Theo Weiss. Like uh, it takes more than 1 year to replace those guys, and I think we know that. I would imagine that Eli Drinkwitz and his coaching staff know that as well. So, going to be interesting to follow that. My second weakness, which is one I'm a little unsure on, so you can maybe back me up. But I'm curious to see how the deep ball passing game is this year, and I just think it's something that hasn't necessarily been unlocked with Bo Prabula yet, and with Sam Horn, you could argue the same. It's almost more of a we don't really know what they're capable of doing, and the idea of the RPO, being a more important part of this offense and just design runs in general, kind of counteracts this point. But still, you're going to have receivers who are good in the deep game, like Joshua Manning, like Marquise Johnson, especially Marquise, who's a burner speed wise, super fast. Um, that's going to be a way to get them involved, and it's going to be an effective way to get them involved. But are you able to do that with Bo Prabula and Sam Horn at quarterback? So that's one thing I'm keeping an eye on. Not to say that he's not capable of doing it. It's just something that we've seen, small little glimpses of. And when you think about Bo Prabula as a quarterback, it's not one of his, three most standout traits off the bat. Like I said, he doesn't have all the experience in the world yet, so maybe it's going to come along. But it'll be interesting to see if this is a part of the offense this year, and if it is, I don't know how effective it's going to be.
So it's really interesting that you mentioned that as one of your weaknesses and kind of questions, because I actually listed that as one of my strengths. And I think this mostly because I was in the weeds of Bo and Sam's high school tape, for what I was talking about earlier. And both of them, I mean, especially Sam, like I was talking about with his just flick of the wrist throws, the most impressive points of that are just when he's able to chuck it down the field. I think both of them have really good arms, but I do agree with you there. I mean, Bo just simply wasn't asked to do that a lot at Penn State. They weren't when Bo was subbing in for Penn State. He was not being asked to hit the home run. Um, but I do think both of them definitely have the arms for it, and because of the skill in the wide receiver room that they have for this, I think could definitely work out for them. Um, the biggest thing is just going to be establishing that time with wide receivers for all that we've talked about. I would say Sam might have an advantage with that. Um, just having a a year Marquise Johnson's freshman season where he was able to establish that timing with him, especially considering I'm sure in the Marquise true freshman season he was taking more reps with the twos. I would assume so more reps with Sam Horn, which is obviously crucial for the deep passing game. But I think we talked about it at the end of last year, just the way the offense, what the deep passing game into this offense last year was really weird. And for through the first 4 weeks of the season, it just like straight up was not there. And Brady Cook, like for whatever reason, obviously a lot of fans were quick to point the finger at Brady Cook, which was easy to do when he was missing so many of those passes. A lot of them look to be overthrows, but it's just difficult. I mean, one, without the all 22, two, without knowing the play calls at all, who's really in the fault there. But it was just not there. And then around, I think it was after, maybe it was either before that Vanderbilt game or right after the Vanderbilt game, Brady had talked about to us how it was a focus going forward. Like, we really need to lock in and focus and see what the problem is with the seat passing game and get it working. And it seemed like in that Texas A&M game, they were trying to force it, and it still was not there. And after the Texas A&M game, they said, I mean, whatever. Like this is not going to be a part of our identity this year like it was last. Um, so again, it was just kind of odd. So I'd be interested to see. For what it's worth, I do think it was interesting that Brady Cook said at the NFL scouting combine that one of the main things he was focusing on before the draft process was improving his ability on the deep ball. But interested to see the coaching staff's approach to the deep passing game this season, because it is the one big selling point for Kirby Moore as an offense coordinator. What everybody you talk to, players and coaches, say of his scheme is that it prioritizes the pass. So interested to see what that looks like.
What are the odds of this happening right after I say we never disagree? Um, you know, I guess I completely again I do agree with what you said. I think maybe it's more of a question of when, not if. Um, again, I'm not entirely questioning their ability to do it, but they just haven't shown it yet, and uh, that does make a difference. Obviously, I mean, there that's a you say to mention timing with receivers, and uh, there's so much intricacies that go into the deep ball going well. So I don't disagree. I think they're both capable of it, but when it happens, I guess might be more of a question compared to if it can actually happen.
And I would say too with Sam, as far as being capable, I mean, Sam looks great in high school, but it's 3 years ago, and I mean, he basically has a new elbow or Tommy John surgery now. So
Yeah, I would imagine that. I would imagine that makes quite the large difference in that.
yeah, and
So
even again, I mean, to reference Drinkowitz's interview with Natalie Jones on ABC 17, he said even through the spring, sounded like carrying over to the summer still that Sam is still not like fully 100% back from that. He's able to participate and obviously will be in the fall, but still seeing the effects of that. So we'll have to see how that goes. But what's your third strength prediction for this team, Michael?
I'm staying on the defensive line, so it's not anything too crazier, but I'm switching to the run defense. I don't think that's going to be an issue either. I think the whole defensive front in general is probably going to be one of the best in the conference. But more of the focus on the defensive interior. Chris McClellan he kind of had that breakout year last year, so I don't think anyone's really doubting what he's going to be able to do this year. And then Sterling Webb as well. Not the most proven guy, and the guys behind him are not the most proven as well, but I still think there's enough trust with guys like Webb, and maybe we'll get that breakout from Marshall or Marquise. I think the linebackers are going to help with this as well. I trust Josiah Trotter. He is just a ridiculous, huge tackle machine, and he's good at his job. And he can obviously do, other things outside of that, but I think that's one of the areas he excels the most. Same thing with Nick Rodriguez, and maybe we'll get to see Jeremiah Beasley as well. And the guys on the outside don't hurt either. I think Damon Wilson and Nate Johnson, some guys who are a little more athletic, will help with the running side of things. And then I didn't even mention Tristan Newson uh, for the pass rush or this, so he can check both of those boxes. Obviously, I think we know that by now. So it's just another one of those things. I don't think there's really going to be much questions or doubt with it at all. I mean, maybe on the interior, but at the very minimum, you know what you're getting from Chris McClellan and probably Sterling Webb as well. So you can question the depth beyond those two, but when they're in the game that they're gonna be impactful, and then the outside is fine. Beyond them, the linebacker is fine. And even if you want to get into the secondary with guys like Dalen Cornell, I mean, Jalen Catalon has recorded, hundreds of tackles in his career. It is 15 years of college football. So it goes down the line and down the line for guys who are going to help defend the run. And again, wasn't a massive issue last season. And I don't think there's going to be, any issues with it this season either.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I think there's reason to be more confident in the run defense than pass defense. And especially, I think Troutter's going to be a key addition with that to really just move all over the field and be sort of an enforcer. I don't think many runners are going to be able to get too far past Josiah Trotter.
I'd personally be a little bit scared to try to run past Josiah Trotter.
Yeah, same here. On to third and final weakness, and this was again a little difficult to predict, just because of I certainly have a lot of questions about this team. I considered special teams, just because of I'm not going to question Connor Westman. I really don't have reason to question him, but Blake Craig was consistent last year, besides from 40 through 49 for whatever reason. And I'll hit on that for my actual weakness here in a second. They had issues allowing fake punts. They had issues with penalties. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if that's a weakness, but more so of a question. I have no idea what the unit is actually going to look like. Prediction I actually had, though, was just a little arbitrary, but just how they're going to operate in close games. Especially compared to how they've done there in the past 2 years. I mean, this just goes back to everything we've talked about this whole episode of how fast are they going to be able to establish that chemistry, and even for a first-time starting quarterback to have the confidence and leadership to operate through that. So there's no great scientific reasoning I have for that, but I just there's less reason to be confident in that compared to the past 2 years. I mean, anytime I think Brady Cook has some of the best traits for that. So we'll have to see there. I would not be surprised at all to be proved wrong, and they continue to have these absurd wins that they pull out at the last minute. Any thoughts there, Michael? And what's your final weakness?
Yeah, again, nothing to disagree with there. It's kind of hard to put a stamp or a label on that, I feel like, just because we don't know what this team's going to look like, and there's still some positional uncertainty. But I don't disagree. I think you could probably make an argument for that being the case with every team that has transfer portal turnover every single year. So not a bad point, though. My final one is something we've also kind of touched on, but more focused. It's just the level of experience, especially with the group of transfers. I'm not doubting that some of these guys aren't talented. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But you look at Ahmad Hardy, comes from Louisiana Monroe, obviously had an incredible season, but he was playing in the Sun Belt Conference, right? Javid Richardson hasn't played much, if not at all, but he was a JUCO guy. Johnny Williams played sparingly at West Virginia. Xavier Lloyd, right? This comes from Illinois State. You have Nate Johnson, comes from Appalachian State. Langdon Kitchen from Northwest Missouri State. I'm not questioning how good these guys are, because I think they're good, and I think most people think the same thing. But the list goes on and on of some of these transfers that just haven't played at the highest level yet. So, again, not questioning, if they're capable of competing in the SEC and finding themselves in Missouri's rotation, but more of a matter of when can they make that transition and catch up with the level of speed, speed of play and things like that, and the physicality. I think this is an instance when bringing in a guy like Jalen Catalon, who I made a joke earlier, but is probably one of the most seasoned, veteran players in all of college football, and he's literally been everywhere and has arguably the most experience you can get. And having a guy like that in your locker room is going to be beyond impactful. But I think some of these guys that Missouri brought in this year are talented and maybe a little less on the experience side, but plenty of talent, a high ceiling, but they don't quite have that high level SEC experience yet. So I'm going to be like, again, there's a long list. Like Santana Banner comes from Northern Illinois. Like that's not the most, it's the MAC, so it's not the SEC, obviously. So I think there's going to be some maybe some rude awakenings for some of these guys. Again, I think they're capable of doing it. It's just going to be a matter of time as to when that ends up being the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole focus for Drinkwitz in Missouri in this transfer portal cycle was production of potential to guys that have produced at the lower level and bringing them up. So we'll have to see there exactly how much of them translate. So yeah, end of the day, again, this is just going to be an exciting team to watch. Certainly not the Missouri team over the past 3 years with the highest expectations, but I really couldn't give you a great win total prediction at this moment.
I just want to add one more thing, and obviously, like I've been around Missouri sports for the longest, and I don't know how long you have, Joey, but I feel like there's like plenty of reason to be excited about this team because there's so much uncertainty, right? But you over the last few years, you know what you're getting in Brady and Luther and Theo and all these guys who I mentioned earlier are kind of like a cornerstone of a program, and they're gone. So now nobody really knows what to expect. It's all prediction and guessing, like what we're doing right now. And the product that we get, against Central Arkansas is hopefully not the one we get by the time actual Arkansas comes around. But there's gonna be so much room for growth, and I just think the level of uncertainty. I understand why it's scary to some, but at the same time, it should be exciting just because this is kind of this new model of college football where you're reloading with the transfer portal, and Missouri's on board with that. So, my opinion should be exciting. Again, I understand why people might be nervous about having a team full of players they're not too familiar with, but there's talent all across the board. I think this should be a very, very fun season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like a box of chocolates or the jelly bean challenge where you don't know if you're going to get the good or bad flavor. Maybe that should be our next podcast episode. We take a jelly bean that represents like each player going into an unpredictable season.
What was that called again? I can't remember.
I think Jelly Belly is just the company, but I
Yeah.
I gotta look this up.
I'd be lying if I said I hadn't participated in that a time or two
Oh
over my
yes,
childhood.
absolutely. Um, the toothpaste flavor was supposed to be a bad flavor, but it rocked. Bean Boozled.
Yes. Yes.
So
Direct
Bean
comparison.
Boozled type of season coming up for Missouri, if that's what you're looking for in a sports team. So it'll be an exciting year all around. Like we said at the top, we are finally getting into the excitement of the season. SEC Media Days coming up here in 2 weeks. Eli Drinkwitz and 3 players speaking Thursday. And then after that, the next week probably will be the start of fall camp. So from now on, we'll probably be joining you every week for a podcast where we get to talk about actual football. So appreciate you tuning into this episode and hope you do the same for the rest of our coverage over at Missouri Tigers on SI.